All right. So we've read how Exodus took the people of Israel out of Egypt and conquered a lot of the Egypt's gods through the 10 plagues, right? We traveled with Moses for about 2 months now. Been a little bit over 2 months at this point. So we're at the start of the third month that they've been out of Egypt at this point. We've already encountered the Amalekites last time, right? They complain about not having enough water and then not having enough food as well, right? And God has provided for them. So now we're going to step into one of arguably the most popular chapters in the Bible. Many people who don't even know the Bible know about Psalm 23. And then second, they know about the Ten Commandments. So we're about to read the Ten Commandments, as chapter 20. However, there is a chapter before chapter 20, it's chapter 19. A lot of people just, they read it and they just can't wait to get to the part of chapter 20, right? But you have to understand that to the Israelites, chapter 19 is very, very important. Technically, chapter 19 through the end of chapter 24. What is this? It's the covenant at Sinai. The covenant, the contract, the deal that God made with his people, right? Now, a lot of people misconstrue this and actually think, oh, so this is where the covenant is made, right here. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Remember, God made the covenant with Abraham, and then went down to Isaac, and then went down to Jacob. Now he is making it here official with the rest of the people. 430 years later, right? So it is a very important thing, the covenant between God and his people. He's going to state basically what he expects from them, how he's going to meet them here in this chapter 19 for the first time. And then we're going to go over through the Ten Commandments and then a little bit about slavery and a couple of other things. And then tomorrow we'll continue, of course. But this is going to be an interesting chapter. There's a few things here that I want to mention as we go along. So with that being said, let's start. Chapter 19, the Israelites at Mount Sinai. Let me take out my glasses here for now. The people of Israel left Rephidim, and on the first day of the third month after they had left Egypt, they came to the desert of Sinai. There they set up camp at the foot of Mount Sinai, and Moses went up to the mountain to meet with God. So, first and foremost, Mount Sinai is one of the most sacred locations in Israel's history. It is believed to be located in the south-central Sinai Peninsula. This mountain is where Moses met God in a burning bush, back in chapter 3 of Exodus. God made his covenant with Israel, and Elijah heard God in a gentle whisper. That story is in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 8 through 12. Now here God gave his people the laws and guidelines for right living. Here they learned the potential blessings of obedience, right? And the tragic consequences of disobedience as well. The Lord called to him from the mountain and told him to say to the Israelites, Jacob's descendants, you saw what I, the Lord, did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you as an eagle carries her young on her wings, and brought you here to me. Whoa, let's go back here. This is kind of important. And that's where I kind of slowed down. I carried you as an eagle carries her young on her wings, and brought you here to me. What's the big deal about an eagle here? Well, now I'll show you in a second, but first, a commercial. No, just kidding. First, we're going to talk about something that, again, a lot of people just gloss over. They don't even realize what's going on. A lot of people think that Moses went to see God on the mountain once, maybe twice, and that's it. No, 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 no. At least 7 times. At least 7 times that we're going to talk about. Might be more, but at least 7 times. Ironically, just in this chapter alone, chapter 19, Moses is going to go up and down, up and down, up and down 3 times. The first time is from verse 3 to verse 7. The second time from verse 8 to verse 14. And the third time from verse 20 to verse 25. This is all in chapter 19. Then he also goes up in chapter 20 for the fourth time, in chapter 24 for the fifth time, in chapter 32, I think it is, or 32 for the sixth time, and then chapter 34 for the seventh time. And of all those times, a couple of times he stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights on top of everything else. But what's this about the eagle? Well, let me break out the other Bible that I have. I got to share something with you guys from Deuteronomy. Like I've told you guys before, to read the Bible, to understand it, you have to know the Bible. And this will be like a good little primer for you guys. So whenever you read chapter 19 to anybody, right, and it talks about eagles, about an eagle, right? You say, what does an eagle have to do? Why don't you skip to the next paragraph and go on, Rudy? Now I gotta share something important with you guys. We're gonna go to Deuteronomy, chapter 32. Sounds good. 32, right? Let's going to go to verse 9 through 11. Nine through 11. Let me see. Yeah. So we'll start right here. Now, this, in case you guys are wondering, where are we going with this? Well, this is Deuteronomy chapter 32, right? Chapter 32, the beginning of 32 is called the Song of Moses, right? Okay. I'm going to save you a little bit of time, and let's go from verse 9. Verse 9, 10, and 11. That'll be good. I'll read it to you now. The Lord's people are his share. Jacob is the nation he has received. Oh, we're probably saying, Jacob, I thought Jacob had passed away. Yes, he has. But remember how Jacob was given the name Israel when he fought God, when he wrestled with God that whole night? And the next morning, your name will no longer be Jacob, it'll be Israel. So Jacob and Israel are names that kind of get substituted back and forth. So consider Jacob Israel. The Lord's people are his share. Israel, or Jacob, is the nation he has received. The Lord found Israel, here we go, in a desert. He found them in an empty and windy land. He took care of them and kept them safe. He guarded them as he would guard his own eyes. Let's go to verse 11. This is one that I want to point out. Verse 11. He was like an eagle that stirs up its nest. It hovers over its little ones. It spreads out its wings to catch them. It carries them up in the air on its feathers. So, hopefully you understood that so far, but we're going to shake that little apple tree a little bit here right now. What does it mean? And let's look into the life of an eagle, a real eagle, okay? Eagles are depicted in the Old Testament as birds who care for the weak, for the babies, especially. They really care for their weak. Well, don't other birds care for their kids too, for the little chicks? Yeah, but here's the thing. Eagles are also fierce birds of prey. So here you have a combination of two things. An eagle is depicted in the Old Testament as a bird who cares for its weak, right? And also, don't forget, eagles means fierce birds of prey. So when we combine both of them, what do you get? Power and protection. Power and protection, which is what we get from the Lord. That's why the Lord is signified as an eagle in this case, because he protects his children with power and protection. Now we can continue a little further. We'll even read it again. Verse 4. You saw what I, the Lord, did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you, as an eagle carries her young on her wings, and brought you here to me. Now if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own people. The whole earth is mine, but you will be my chosen people, a people dedicated to me alone, and you will serve me as priests. We're going to get to that in a second, priests. But first of all, God has a reason for rescuing the Israelites from slavery. Now he was ready to tell them what it was. Israel was to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, so that the whole world would know God through his people. So in other words, it's not that they actually became priests with all the with an ephod in the front and a turban and all that stuff, not necessarily, but they were symbolically they were priests, because now the whole world would get to have the gift of God through them. Okay, I hope you understood that part. So in other words, he was telling them that as kingdom of priests and a holy nation, the whole world would know God through them. But the people's sin kept them from entering God's presence directly, and also from fulfilling their roles as priests for the world. So God established Aaron's descendants from the tribe of Levi as actual priests. We're going to read about that in Leviticus chapter 8 and chapter 9. To represent the entire nation before God. And with the coming of Jesus Christ, God has fulfilled his plan by making it possible for all believers to become holy royal priests. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 in the New Testament. We are all royal priests at this point. The death and resurrection of Christ has allowed each of us to approach God freely and to share his love with the world. Let's continue here. So Moses went down and called the leaders of the people together and told them everything that the Lord had commanded him. Then all the people answered together, "We will do everything that the Lord has said." And Moses reported this to the Lord. So here Moses went up, came down, and here he goes up again to the Lord, right? God has made a covenant with Abraham, promising to make his descendants into a great nation. That's back in Genesis 15. Now the promise was being realized as God restated his agreement with the Israelite nation, the descendants of Abraham, right? God promised to bless and care for them. The people promised to obey him. The covenant was sealed, but the good intentions of the people quickly wore off. Have you made a commitment to God? How are you holding up your end of the bargain? And not to mention that, why did God choose Israel as his nation? God was honoring his promise to Abraham. Don't forget that. God knew that no nation on earth was good enough to deserve to be called his people, his special treasure. He chose Israel not because of anything the people had done, but because of his love and mercy. And in spite of the wrong that the nation had done and actually would do, why did he want to have a special relation on earth? To represent his way of life, to teach his word, and to be an agent of salvation to the world. All the nations of the earth would be blessed through Abraham's descendants. That's from Genesis chapter 18. Gentiles and kings would come to the Lord through Israel, predicted Isaiah chapter 60. Through the nation of Israel, the Messiah, God's chosen son, will be born. God chose one nation and put it through a rigorous training program so that one day it could be channeled for his blessing to the whole world. Just want to clear things up right there, Okay, let's continue now. The Lord said to Moses, "I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will believe you from now on." Moses told the Lord what the people had answered, and the Lord said to him, "Go to the people and tell them to spend today and tomorrow purifying themselves for worship. They must wash their clothes and be ready the day after tomorrow. On that day I will come down on Mount Sinai, where all the people can see me." Moses was told to consecrate the people. This meant getting them physically and spiritually ready to meet God. The people were to set themselves apart from sin and even ordinary daily routines in order to dedicate themselves to God. The act of washing and preparing served to get their minds and hearts ready. When we meet God for worship, we should set aside the cares and preoccupations of everyday life. Use your time of physical preparation to get your mind ready to meet God. All right. Mark a boundary around the mountain that the people must not cross, and tell them not to go up to the mountain or even get near it. If any of you set foot on it, you are to be put to death. You must either be stoned or shot with arrows without anyone touching you. This applies to both people and animals. They must be put to death, but when the trumpet is blown, then the people are to go up to the mountain. Then Moses came down the mountain, right? And told the people to get ready for worship. So they washed their clothes, and Moses told them, "Be ready by the day after tomorrow, and do not have sensual relations in the meantime." On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning. There you go. I want to make sure you guys can see this. There was thunder and lightning. A thick cloud appeared on the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast was heard. All the people in the camp trembled with fear. Moses led them out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. At the foot of the mountain. All of Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord had come down on it in fire. The smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the people trembled violently. The sound of the trumpet became louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. The Lord came down on the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. Here goes Moses a third time up the mountain. Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, "Go down and warn the people not to cross the boundary to come and look at me. If they do, many of them will pass away. Even the priests who come near me must purify themselves, or I will punish them." Moses said to the Lord, "The people cannot come up, because you commanded us to consider the mountain sacred and to mark a boundary around it." Because God's glory and power were so strong, and because God is completely holy, the people could not come to him. God did this to show that he was not like the idols of Egypt. They could be seen and touched. Now, however, we are invited to approach God because of what Christ has done for us. Jesus is superior to Moses because Jesus opens the way for us to come to God with great joy. Amen. The Lord replied, "Go down and bring Aaron back with you. But the priests and the people must not cross the boundary to come up to me, or I will punish them." Moses then went down to the people and told them what the Lord had said. Okay, now we're going to go to chapter 20. Chapter 20. Now, before we go into the Ten Commandments, why were the Ten Commandments necessary for God's new nation? At the foot of Mount Sinai, God showed his people the true function and beauty of his laws. The commandments were designed to lead Israel to a life of practical holiness. In them, people could see the nature of God and his plan for how they should live. The commands and guidelines were intended to direct the community to meet the needs of each individual in a loving and responsible manner. By Jesus' time, however, most people had come to look at the law the wrong way. They saw it as a means to prosperity in both this world and the next, and they thought that obeying every law was a way to learn God's protection from foreign invasions and natural disaster. They failed to see that keeping the law should be the means to fulfill God's ultimate law of love. Okay? So let's read the first 5 or 6 verses here. 20. God spoke, and these were his words: I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, where you were slaves. Worship no God but me. Second, do not make for yourselves images of anything in heaven or on earth or in the water under the earth. Do not bow down to any idol or worship it, because I am the Lord your God, and I tolerate no rivals. I bring punishment on those who hate me and on their descendants down to the third and fourth generation. But I show my love for thousands of generations of those who love me and obey my laws. So the Israelites had just come from Egypt, a land of many idols and many gods. Because each god represented a different aspect of life, it was common to worship many gods in order to get the maximum number of blessings. When God told his people to worship and believe in him, that wasn't so hard for them. He was just one more God to add to the list. But when he said, you must not have any other God but me, that was difficult for the people to accept. But if they didn't learn that the God who had led them out of Egypt was the only true God, they could not be his people, no matter how faithful they kept the other 9 commandments. So God made this his first commandment: no other gods. Totally, we can allow many things to become gods to us. Relationships, money, affirmation, work, pleasure can become gods when we concentrate too much on them for personal identity, meaning, and security. No one sets out with intentions of worshiping these things. But by the amount of time we devote to them, we can allow them to grow into gods that ultimately control our thoughts and energies. Letting God hold the central place in our lives keeps things from turning into gods. Let's go to verse 7, the third commandment. Do not use my name for evil purposes, for I, the Lord your God, will punish anyone who misuses my name. God's name is special because it carries his personal identity. Using it frivolously or in a curse is so common today that we may fail to realize how serious it is. The way we use God's name conveys how we really feel about him. We should respect his name and use it appropriately, speaking it in praise or worship rather than in curse or jest. Not joking, not cursing. We should not take lightly the abuse or dishonor of God's name. Continuing, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. You have 6 days in which to do your work, but the 7th day is a day of rest dedicated to me. On that day, no one is to work, neither you, your children, your slaves, your animals, nor the foreigners who live in your country. In 6 days, I, the Lord, made the earth, the sky, the seas, and everything in them. There we go. I hope. Okay. But on the seventh day I rested. That is why I, the Lord, blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. The Sabbath was a day set aside for rest and worship. God commanded a Sabbath because human beings need to spend unhurried time in worship and rest each week. A God who is concerned enough to provide a day each week for us to rest is actually very wonderful. Observing a regular time of rest and worship in our fast paced world demonstrates how important God is to us, and it gives us the exact benefit of refreshing our spirits. In other words, do not neglect God's provision. Let's continue. Respect your father and mother so that you may live a long time in the land that I'm giving you. Do not commit murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. The first four commandments show us how to relate to God. The next six shows us how to treat other people. The prohibitions against murder, adultery, and stealing require us to respect the life, the personhood, and possessions and integrity of others. These are hallmarks, important things, in other words, for how God wants us to live today. Now, in verse 12, respect your father and mother so that you may live a long life in the land that I'm giving you. This is the first commandment with a promise attached to it. To live in peace for generations in the promised land, the Israelites would need to respect authority and build strong families. But what does it mean to honor parents? Partly it means speaking well of them and politely to them. It also means showing them courtesy and respect, though not obeying them if that means disobeying God, by the way. It means following their teachings and example when they put God first. Parents have a special place in God's sight. Even those who find it difficult to get along with their parents are still commanded to honor them. Verse 16, do not accuse anyone falsely. To testify falsely means to lie, plain and simple. God knew that Israel could not survive unless its system of justice was incorruptible. We should be honest in our private dealings as well as in our public statements. In either situation, we testify falsely by leaving something out of a story, telling a half-truth, twisting the facts, or inventing a lie. God warns us against deception. Even though deception is a way of life for many people, God's people must not adopt it. 17. Do not desire another man's house. Do not desire his wife, his slaves, his cattle, his donkeys, or anything else that he owns. So to covet is to wish to have the possessions of others. It goes beyond simply admiring someone else's possession or thinking, I like to have one of those. Coveting includes envy, resenting the fact that others have what you do not. God knows that possessions never make anyone happy for long, since only God can supply all our needs. True contentment is found only in Himself, in God. When you begin to covet, try to determine it a more basic need is leading you to envy. For example, you may covet someone's success not because you want to take it away, but because you would like to feel appreciated by others, as that person is. In this case, pray that God will help you deal with your resentment and meet your basic needs. 18. When the people heard the thunder and the trumpet blast, and saw the lightning and the smoky mountain, they trembled with fear and stood a long way off. They said to Moses, if you speak to us, we will listen, but we are afraid that if God speaks to us, we will pass away. 20. Moses replied, do not be afraid. God has only come to test you and make you keep on obeying Him so that you will not sin. Throughout the Bible, we find this phrase, Do not be afraid. Right? Many times. God wasn't trying to scare the people. He was showing his mighty power so the Israelites will know he was the true God and therefore obey him. If they would do this, he would make his power available to them. God wants us to follow him out of love rather than fear. To overcome fear, we must think more about his love. First John 4:18 says, perfect love expels all fear. 21. But the people continued to stand a long way off, and only Moses went near the dark cloud where God was. The Lord commanded Moses to tell the Israelites, you have seen how I, the Lord, have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gold to be worshipped in addition to me. Make an altar of earth for me, and on it sacrifice your sheep and your cattle as offerings to be completely burned, and as fellowship offerings. In every place that is set aside for you to worship me, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stone for me, do not build it out of cut stones, because when you use a chisel on stones, you make them unfit for my use. Do not build an altar for me with steps leading up to it. If you do, you will expose yourself as you go up the steps. Sometimes people wonder about these two things. The main reason people were not supposed to use tools to make these stones because they would probably make idols of those stones, as they actually did much later on anyways. And about going up the altar and not letting anybody see your nakedness, because a lot of the other Canaanite religions would use sensual acts, I'll say it that way, when they were doing worshiping to their gods. A lot of sensual acts. So our God, God Almighty, the one and true living God, does not want to have anything to do with sex when we honor him, or anything to do with nakedness. That's the reason for these two statements here. Some people sometimes wonder why that is in there. So let's continue with chapter 21. The treatment of slaves. Give the Israelites the following laws. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve you for 6 years. Now, before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about this. From verse 1 through verse 36 of this chapter, these laws were given because everything we do has consequences. It is vital to think before acting, to consider the effects of our choices. Think of your plans for today and consider what their long-range results might be. As we deal with others, we should keep the principles of these laws in mind. We should act responsibly and justly with all people, friends and enemies alike. Let's continue here. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve you for 6 years. In the 7th year, he is to be set free without having to pay anything. The Hebrews, though freed from slavery, had slaves for servants themselves. Why? A person could become a slave because of poverty, debt, or even crime. But Hebrew slaves were treated as humans, not property, and were allowed to work their way to freedom. The Bible acknowledges the existence of slavery, but never encourages it. Let's continue here. If he was unmarried when he became your slave, he is not to take a wife. Hold on. He is not to take a wife with him when he leaves. But if he was married when he became your slave, he may take his wife with him. If his master gave him a wife and she bore him sons or daughters, the woman and her children belong to the master, and the man is to leave by himself. But if the slave declares that he loves his master, his wife, and his children, and does not want to be set free, then his master shall take him to the place of worship. There he is to make him stand against the door of the doorpost and put a hole through his ear. Then he will be his slave for life. If a man sells his daughter as a slave, she is not to be set free, as male slaves are. If she is sold to someone who intends to make her his wife, but he doesn't like her, then she is to be sold back to her father. Her master cannot sell her to foreigners, because he has treated her unfairly. If a man buys a female slave to give to his son, he is to treat her like a daughter. If a man takes a second wife, he must continue to give his first wife the same amount of food and clothing and the same rights that she had before. If he does not fulfill these duties to her, he must set her free and not receive any payment. Verse 12. Whoever hits someone and deletes him is to be put to death. But if it was an accident and he did not mean to delete him, he can escape to a place which I would choose for you, and there he will be safe. But when someone gets angry and deliberately destroys someone else, he is to be put to death, even if he has run to my altar for safety. Whoever hits his father or his mother is to be put to death. Whoever kidnaps someone either to sell them or to keep them as a slave is to be put to death. Whoever curses his father or his mother is to be put to death. 18. If there is a fight and someone hits someone else with a stone or with his fist, but does not destroy him, he is not to be punished. If the one who was hit has to stay in bed, but later is able to get up and walk outside with the help of a cane, the one who hit him is to pay for his lost time and take care of him until he gets well. 20. If a slave owner takes a stick and beats his slave, whether male or female, and the slave passes away on the spot, the owner is to be punished. But if the slave does not pass away for a day or two, the master is not to be punished. The loss of his property is punishment enough. If some men are fighting and hurt a pregnant woman, so that she loses her child, but she is not injured in any other way, the one who hurt her is to be fined. Hold on a second. Is to be fined whatever amount the woman's husband demands, subject to the approval of the judges. But if the woman herself is injured, the punishment shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. The eye for an eye rule was instituted as a guide for judges, not as a rule for personal relationships or to justify revenge. This rule made the punishment fit the crime, thereby preventing the cruel and barbaric punishments that characterize many ancient societies. Jesus took this principle a step further to teach us not to retaliate. That's in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 to 48. Judges, parents, teachers, and others who work with people must make wise decisions in order to for the discipline to be effective. A punishment too harsh is unfair, and one too lenient is powerless to teach. Ask God for wisdom before you judge. If someone hits his male or female slave in the eye and puts it out, he is to free the slave as payment for the eye. If he knocks out a tooth, he is to free the slave as payment for the tooth. 28. If a bull gores someone to death, it is to be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but its owner is not to be punished. But if the bull has been in the habit of attacking people, and its owner has been warned, but did not keep it penned up, then if it gores someone to death, it is to be stoned, and its owner is to be put to death as well. However, if the owner is allowed to pay a fine to save his life, he must pay the full amount required. If the bull destroys a boy or a girl, the same rule applies. If the bull destroys a male or female slave, its owner shall pay the owner of the slave 30 pieces of silver, and the bull shall be stoned to death. Remember, 30 pieces of silver is the price of a slave. It's the price that Judas Iscariot was paid to betray Jesus Christ. 30 pieces of silver. If someone takes the cover off a pit, or if he digs one and does not cover it, and a bull or a donkey fall into it, he must pay for the animal. He is to pay the money to the owner and may keep the dead animal. If someone's bull kills someone else's bull, the two of them shall sell the live bull and divide the money. They shall also divide up the meat from the dead animal. But if it was known that the bull had been in the habit of attacking and its owner did not keep it penned up, he must make good the loss by giving the other man a live bull. But he may keep the dead animal. Amen. Let me break out my little book here. Hold on. Recap notes, Okay. So we read chapter 19, chapter 20, and chapter 21, right? So far. So at the beginning, we found that the 7 weeks after leaving Egypt, the Israelites get to Mount Sinai, also called the mountain of God. God says he wants to meet with them, so they need to consecrate themselves. This is what he told them to do for the firstborns, to set them apart and prepare them to encounter God. Consecration usually involves a bath and clean clothes. Moses says to abstain from relations as well, not because women are evil, but because seminal fluids and blood are symbols of life and death. To be depleted of either of those things points to the depletion of life, which is not fitting for the presence of the giver of life. Also, they cannot get close to the mountain or they will pass away. If someone does pass away, no one's allowed to touch that person because it'll transfer both their death sentence and the power of God. Bottom line, God's power is not hypothetical. A storm and a trumpet blast signal God's arrival, right? He descends as fire, covering Mount Sinai in smoke. Then there's an earthquake. In the midst of the storm, fire, smoke, earthquake, and ever-increasing trumpet sound. God tells Moses to come closer, to climb the mountain. No one's allowed to touch because God has a few things to tell him, namely the 10 Commandments, which we covered in chapter 20. God is talking to Moses, but the people overhear. God uses his personal name with them and points to his love for them. I am Yahweh, your God. I brought you out of slavery. He enters with relationship before telling them his laws. Then he gives the 10 commandments. That's what they're called in Hebrews, 10 words. The first 5 words are vertical, how to honor God, and the last 5 words are horizontal, how to honor others. Here are some things worth noting, though. The second word, about idols and graven images, reveals our natural inclination to worship things. Everyone worships something. Mostly we worship what we see regularly. The challenge for our idolatrous hearts is that Yahweh has no physical form. In order to worship him, we have to move beyond our human nature, which means setting aside the created things we can see with our eyes, even though God does appropriate a physical form from time to time. That's called a theophany. We covered that a couple of days ago. So, like in theophanies, he's not attached to or confined to that form. And when God says he's jealous, it is not like our jealousy and envy. The word used here is used only in reverence to God. Its meaning is more like protective or zealous. He's protective of and zealous of his relationship with us. It's actually an act of love. In the third word, we see how serious God takes his name. There are a lot of layers here, though, people, a lot of them. Let's just focus on three quick ones. As people who have taken his name, we're called to live in ways that show we belong to him. Second, this prohibits any kind of insincere or frivolous use of his name because it suggests we're not taking it seriously. And three, God takes personal offense to anything that diminishes his personhood or character. His names represent his character and his actions. Taking God's name in vain could also correspond to doubting that he is who he says he is. Now, in the last chapter 21, it gives us a general outline for how to live in civil society and treat others well. It reveals God's desire to protect and respect life, including life in the womb, because all life points to its giver. So, in essence, if you sum all three chapters into one paragraph, I would say when the people see God's power and are afraid, Moses says something that seems contradictory at first. He says, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him will be before you, that you may not sin." That's chapter 20, verse 20, by the way. So, should we be afraid or not? There's a crucial distinction to make between the two uses of the word fear. The fear in do not fear carries the idea of dread. This kind of fear drives us away from God. It's sin adjacent, but Moses uses a different word when he refers to fearing God. It carries the idea of a reverence and an awe. We talked about this the other day, the fear of God, remember? The fear of God is composed primarily of delight and awe. Moving us towards God is like what we feel at the Grand Canyon. We take long trips to go stand on the edge with our eyes and mouths wide open, right? Overwhelmed with beauty, yet knowing that it could destroy us. Moses says that's the kind of fear that keeps us from sinning against God. So we should like that kind of fear that draws us closer to God because he is where the joy is. Amen.